someone that necessarily isn't a huge social media person on a personal level, on a business level, it is imperative that social media plays a huge part.
Today on Time We Discuss, I have John Rich with me. John, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, good to be here, Dan. Thanks.
Awesome. You have an interesting past. So you originally worked in a PR firm, and then you were there for, I believe, 10 years or so, and then you essentially exited that and started your own PR firm. Let's start with working at the PR firm. What was that actually like on a day-to-day?
So I have actually worked at a couple of different PR firms for the past 10 years. So I worked in the industry for 10 years. It primarily working in smaller firms, for whatever reason, I've always kind of gravitated to working in smaller, kind of what they call boutique firms. So anywhere from, 4 to 12 people working, kind of doing smaller accounts, working really with everyone in the company. Whereas traditionally in some of these larger corporate PR firms, obviously will have, account managers that, manage kind of more, newer professionals, not necessarily working with the principals or the VPs or some of these, kind of higher up folks. And so it was great. I'm started working there in DC, did a lot of kind of more advocacy policy type work. Certainly, all of our clients were looking to influence or have some sort of PR presence in the capital city in Washington, D.C. And so it was a great learning experience. And the benefit for me in working with a lot of these smaller firms was I was able to really pick up a lot of small, nuanced elements of PR. So when I'm working with principals or founders of a company or founders of the PR company, right? So for instance, at one PR group, it was 12 people. And so each account, we had to have a founder or, one of the presidents on the account at all time. And so that was a great experience because working very closely with them all the time, you were not only able to pick up the, what are called blocking and tackling or the basics of being a PR professional, but you also picked up kind of smaller aspects of how they operated, whether it was talking to clients, how they thought about things, how they communicated internally, how they ran meetings. And so, you know, it's picking up those small things that make each person successful and kind of tailoring it to leverage for me and how I could leverage it. So that was probably the best part of working with some of these firms.
And let's talk about your exit. So you left there and you started your own PR firm. Why go ahead and do that? Why go down that road?
My kids are, getting older. I have now a 6 and a 5-year-olds. I have another third child coming. And so for me, it was about being an example for my children, to be frank, to saying, hey, I'm going to try this. Let's try and do our own thing. I think I'm capable, I'm gonna, we'll give it a shot. But if it's successful, then it'll be successful and it'll be a great venture, but if it's unsuccessful, then I can at least tell my children, tell my kids like, hey, I tried to do something, I went out and I failed, and that's okay. There's always a way forward, there's always a solution. And so for me, it was about being a leader and being a good example for my kids first and foremost. Like, hey, let's try and do this, right? The second part was I think PR is changing. I think I don't know, I can't tell you when it started to change, but in the last 5 to 10 years, PR went from people think, oh, I need a PR plan. I need to get out to the media. I need to, announce a product or I need to do something and I need a PR person to help me correspond with the media. And I think now in the last 5 years, maybe even the last 7 years, PR has grown to be much more than just media. It's grown to be marketing. It's grown to be brand. There's so many other tactics, and it's more than just a media relations person. And so certainly aspects or people have picked up on this growing trend, but I felt like I had worked at a tech company, I've worked for PR, I've worked in a corporate setting, and so I just felt like I could bring all that experience and do it from a remote setting, right? Remote work has grown, since COVID, but even well before that, and so it just seemed like the right time.
So you talked about, and I thought you were going to go down this road, actually. You talked about it changing the past 5, 10, maybe 7 years ago. And I
Yeah.
thought you were going to talk about social media. So what kind of role does social media play from a PR perspective?
It plays a huge role, right? And so I will be the first person to admit, as much as I like surfing Instagram and looking up, hacks on, whether it's taxes or growing a garden or whatever, right? I wasn't a huge social media person. But more recently, it kind of it ebbs and flows in terms of which platforms and kind of what you're using, right? So of course, you know very well in the last 5 years, podcasts have taken off. I think we're in the golden age of podcasts. And so it was a new medium for, I'll say in my perspective, for businesses or my clients to spread their products, their thought leadership, their content. And so social media plays a huge part. And that's something I realized in the last couple of years. And specifically right now, I'm very big on LinkedIn. I think it's probably the biggest platform that I encourage my clients to have a huge presence on and to really push that. But then again, I work with clients that are more in the enterprise space, right? So to me, LinkedIn is just an incredible platform where they have a native writing. So instead of like a Substack or Medium, they have their own native platform where you can write blogs. They're incorporating video, they're incorporating podcasts. You can clip podcasts, and so to me, it's a great way to use social media to build your brand and find new clients. Now, certainly, if you're in the retail space, Instagram's a big one, of course, TikTok. And Facebook's also making a comeback too. So again, as someone that necessarily isn't a huge social media person on a personal level, you know, on a business level, it is imperative that social media plays a huge part. And it to me, it's not necessarily social media is not just saying I'm here or I'm doing this. There's a really thoughtful way that clients need to leverage social media through really good content creation. That's again thought leadership. It's sharing people their views on certain topics. It's not necessarily maybe speaking to their desired audience, but speaking to other people and really growing a community that at some point you're going to hope to kind of convert and maybe make some sales off of, or maybe that community will introduce you to another, potential client or more customers. And so it's really just growing a community as big as you can. It can be incredibly diverse. It doesn't have to be your target audience, but the bigger community you grow, the better results you'll have.
Sticking with social media,
Yeah.
how much of that are people using that for crisis management? How often does that come up?
So that's a really good question. Crisis management is a whole nother, it's a whole nother, ball game. And I'm really like happy in a weird way to have gone through it. It's just one of those things where you just kind of have to get through it. There's no perfect time to practice it without potential negative results. You just got to get through it, right? And just hope you learn from your mistake. I think social media in general is a great way to use press. Now, you see a lot of the larger corporations use it on a PR platform, right? It's a very strategic way to say something, without necessarily having to send out a whole press release and doing this whole rigmarole of, getting all these approvals, making sure it's at the right press person. Again, to your specific question, using social media is about a strategy, who you're trying to talk to, right? So if this crisis is coming from a reporter, right? If say the New York Times is, calling you and I want all these different things, at the end, a good crisis management person is going to say, first step, all right, what's our goal? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? What is the best case scenario and what is the worst case scenario? And your best case scenario could be a really bad piece in the New York Times. Worst case scenario is we're getting lawsuits left and right, right? And so I think a good crisis person is going to say, when working with the client, what's our best case? What's our worst case, right? And so let's figure that out first. And then we have to say, well, how are we going to handle this? Is this reporter or is this, again, I'm speaking it from a media perspective. There's a lot of different crises that can happen. But are we working with the media outlet in general, or if it's just kind of a bubbling issue on social media, it's a really good way to speak directly to your audience, basically using social media. So I think that's probably the best way to do it in a crisis situation. But being vulnerable, being honest, and not begetting more questions, I think is the best way to expel that. And through social media is a good way to do that.
When it comes to PR firms, do you, and I guess this would probably be more so with larger firms, do
Yeah.
you get specific people that like specialize in different aspects? So you might have someone that specializes in crisis management or someone that specializes in press releases or something like that. Or not necessarily. It's like, well, whoever's available, you take care of this, or you've been doing this for 20 years. This is a big one. You better take care of this. What does that typically look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It really depends on the makeup of the firm, which is why I working at so many different firms was really eye-opening and really enlightening. I mean, I can only speak to kind of what I think would be a good team. And yeah, to your point, at bigger firms, there's typically someone, you're typically in a sector, right? So whether you're finance, whether you're political, whether you're retail, whether you're healthcare, tech, whatever it is, typically a good PR firm will have someone that has the media relationships in that sector, right? Where we can kind of go to, or they have a good idea of, hey, here's a certain website or certain publication that we could leverage for these things, right? But to your point, in an ideal world, you would have someone that does media. You would have someone maybe that has 5 clients that does social media, really good at content, has really good ideas. Depending on how big the firm is, do they have some sort of a media creation? So do they have like a videographer team or even just at the bare minimum, a graphic designer that can kind of help clients build some of these things? And then of course you're going to have a high level manager that kind of is the quarterback of this kind of small team that says, okay, here's a campaign. We're going to lay out the strategy timelines. Here's everyone's role and responsibility. Go execute, and let's kind of come back each week and see where we're at. So it to your point, I think the best teams are the teams that really use an individual's strengths as much as they can, right?
Sticking with the sectors, for instance,
Yeah.
how important is it someone to have additional education in those areas? So if they want to, they want to work in the PR realm, but they also want to say like be in the political sector. Do they need to go to school for political science as well as like marketing, public relations, or something like that? How important is that as far as the sectors go?
I'm going to give you a two-sided answer. I think education's important, like having a diploma, and I think it's employers and people look to say, hey, you got this diploma, you were able to complete this, you've shown that you're responsible and be reasonably successful, kind of taking care of business in undergrad. But what I can specifically speak to is what skills are necessary. Being a good writer is in any profession is so incredibly important. It's not even say writing op-eds or writing short copy or writing, but being able to coherently and concisely communicate your ideas, whether it's to your client, to a reporter, to a podcast host, that's a huge skill that I think people might starting to be lose just because everyone's texting, language is just things always change and that's fine. But being sure that you can be a professional writer is such a huge skill. Um, but I also think there's a lot of innate abilities that you don't necessarily get directly from school. So for instance, I went to a 4-year undergrad school in Virginia, and I think one of my biggest skills is working with people, talking with people, kind of being the salesy person. And I think going to school, I learned to kind of hone that in dealing with all sorts of people. And that was kind of one of those soft skills that I learned, whether it's through my father or just kind of who I was as a person. And so what I'm trying to do is leverage that. I know that's a strength for me, so I'm going to double down on that strength. And so I think that's what's kind of helped me kind of start my own firm. But I think school is important. But at the same time, it doesn't mean you will be successful. You need to have tenacity. You need to, just like anything, you need to be able to not be afraid to make mistakes, not be afraid to talk to people, get out of your comfort zone in all those elements.
You're
Yeah.
not the first person to say that writing is super important. I've had so many people say that it's a very it's once you get that skill, it's universal. You can kind of take that
Yeah.
to a variety of different occupations or into different careers
Yeah.
or anything like that. So it's
100%.
awesome to hear yet another person say that. That is huge.
And I will also add too, I think being a salesperson, I think being writing is a huge part of it, but also, you're it enable people regardless of what industry you're in or what job you're in, you're always selling something, right? You may not be selling a car or a product, but you're always selling ideas. You're always selling yourself. You're always selling the client. And so being able to be persuasive, so that's also in good writing, but also orally, being persuasive and being able to sell ideas or sell yourself or sell a notion, that is incredibly important. So the sooner people can learn to do that, and whether they have to go to school to do it or not, I would also recommend that as well.
That's awesome advice. That is great.
Yeah.
So, John, let's talk about your firm. So, you worked at another firm, you left, created your own. I remember speaking with another person whose name eludes me, but they said that it wasn't uncommon for when people leave different firms, different clients might go with them. They kind of follow them around, perhaps. Did you experience that when you started your own firm? Did any people say like, I want to continue working with John, and they left with, not left, but then they started working with you directly? What was that like?
I did not take any clients with me. There were a couple people that expressed interest, and out of respect for my previous boss and his team, I didn't want to do that. I think maintaining relationships are incredibly important. As someone that's a remote worker, it's difficult to do that, right? Because you're constantly in your room. So while it's great, I don't have to travel, I don't do all these things, it does kind of hinder my ability to create new relationships and maintain those relationships through in-person contacts. But no, I didn't take any clients with me. I want to, one of the main reasons I started doing my own thing was I wanted to be honest, and I wanted to have a set of principles that I felt like I could be a good business person, that I could be a good steward of relationships and my clients. And so no, I didn't take any with me. I would have loved to. It would have been a lot easier. But I, I didn't want to do that. I didn't think that was the right way to start, just to start my endeavor.
John, that's awesome. That's very admirable. There's a lot of integrity that goes with that. So I applaud you for that.
I try. It's hard. I try though. I try.
So this is good. This sets me up for the next question then. So I want you to think back, and I've asked this to several entrepreneurs that I've spoken with. I want you to go back to that very first client that you got once you had your own firm.
Yeah.
What was that like? How difficult was that? How did that person come to be?
Getting my first client, I had to go in person to DC to pitch them, the whole team, and it was difficult, but also at the same time, it was a lot of fun. And I think if you see some of these things as not necessarily a challenge that you should be scared of, but a challenge you kind of want to face, it actually is kind of fun. And you get that adrenaline pumping, and you're kind of playing off of, they're asking you questions, and you're trying to read their body language and read some of their questions. And you're seeing who likes what and who doesn't, and then you're trying to talk to that person and kind of persuade them that your idea or strategy is right, or your vision for what they should do is right. So it was difficult, but at the same time, it was a fun challenge.
When it comes to continue to grow your organization and getting more clients,
Mhm.
what is your most successful avenue? Is it, cold calls? Is it hitting the pavement? Is it social media? What's your secret weapon there to try to bring more people in and get more interest in your firm?
That's a great question. So first off, it's with a couple of my clients, it's really just executing and delivering exceptional service, or just doing a really good job, working hard, being honest. And so I've already gotten a couple referrals from my existing clients to their friends. And I think that is a built-in, easy, like that's a great vehicle for new clients. And so when you have a client, you deliver and you focus on that, because that could lead to free referrals, built-in trust and confidence, emails. And so that's number one. That's what you really should be shooting for. I've started kind of creating more blogs and really focusing on SEO, search engine optimization. Again, as a remote worker, I think people that are finding PR people, or really any service online, everyone gets it. We're all in this remote digital world, so there isn't that necessary like uncomfortability of finding someone online. This is 2024. This is not the year 2000, right? And so that's the next step. And that's also SEO for me is a huge deal, because similar to my clients, if you build this online community and you build this SEO kind of this SEO brand, and you really kind of focus in on it, again, you're building an engaging community, but also I have proof points to clients to be like, hey, this is a winning strategy. Let's do this. And so Those are really my top two. Social media certainly is starting to grow. I need to put a little more effort into that, I'll be honest with you. But those are really the three main vehicles.
Um, Pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Love it.
Um, how how different is it now working in PR now that you're completely remote? Because before, you would have been in an office, you may have been working remote a day or two a week, maybe, or something like that. But being completely remote, how different is that really? You're communicating people with people by phone, via email. Is it really any difference from your perspective?
Working remote obviously has its perks and it's great. And I can spend more time with my family. I can, work at night. I can work in different time zones. So it definitely has its perks. I don't have to commute into the office. But it is a little difficult in terms of communicating with people. I think, not working in person, I think you miss some of the creativity, some of the in-person exchanges, some of these random ideas. So I do think it is difficult communicating. So what I try and do is do a lot of phone calls with them, just over communicate. Thankfully, a lot of my clients are in Washington, D.C. I live about 2 hours south. And so I'll go up there every other week for a day trip just to kind of, pop in, get feedback. And so I love it. I love working remote. It allows me to really structure my time how I think is necessary, but at the same time, missing out on some of that in-person synergy, I think is big.
John, this is a part of the show where I like to give the guests I'm speaking with an opportunity to talk about a cause they believe in, a project they're working on, maybe more about their business. So if there's something that you'd like to discuss, the floor is yours.
Well, I mentioned it before. I think the way I like to work is working with smaller teams. I found that working with smaller teams, there's obviously less bureaucracy. I think there's a lot more room for creativity and ideas. I think when you're with a smaller team, in terms of my clients, I think people are willing to take more chances and try out new ideas. And so, what I really when I founded this, I felt like there was this need in the market where a lot of PR firms, at least that I'm aware of, or in the, kind of larger metro areas, a lot of these small teams can't afford them. It's really cost prohibitive, and PR is often seen as a nice to have, not a need to have. And so when I kind of went out and started to do my own thing, I really wanted to target those small teams because A, I work remote, so I don't have the office overhead or some of these other, burdens that make me charge a larger price. But also I can kind of work really closely with 3 or 4 people, work directly with them, bounce ideas off them, and really try new things. And so to me, working with smaller teams, gives startups or VC firms or some other firms an opportunity to kind of have this brand growing asset where they don't have to pay for paid advertising, digital marketing. Most firms don't have that, smaller firms, and so to me, I'd like to try and be a lifeline for smaller companies. And so that's really what I'm trying to focus on. And I'm open and to really working with anyone, that needs help but can't afford some of those, even these smaller boutique agencies.
That's awesome. I'll make sure I get the URL for your website. I'll put that in the show description so everyone can find you when they're looking
Great. I
for you.
appreciate that.
It's interesting. I was speaking with Kyle from Little Guy AI. He's based out of New Jersey,
Okay.
and he's doing a similar thing from a marketing perspective, trying to help out the small companies. He has a lot of passion towards the small businesses, the
Yeah.
local businesses, and trying to help
Yep.
them grow for the very same reason that they might not have the funding to work with a larger marketing agency or something like that. So it's neat to hear that people are trying to do the same thing and trying to help out the people that don't have the large budgets and stuff like that. That's really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it brings up a great point. Like I work with more kind of enterprise or, maybe more strategic type people. But I mean, even like small businesses around the corner, there is an opportunity from the what I call a new PR in terms of marketing or brand or social media. I mean, I always tell clients this. I hate it when we're leaving stuff on the field, right? I hate to compare to other people, but at the same time, like we have to focus on us. And to your point, small local businesses can at least put a lot out there when it comes to Google SEO or like local publications or even like Facebook groups, right? I mean, some of these people aren't thinking about this because they're very busy and they wear 3 or 4 hats. So if I can come in and just kind of take a couple things off your plate and grow your brand over this, for 6 to 12 months, yeah, you may be paying me a fee, but in a year, you're going to have this community, you're going to kind of have this kind of momentum that I think will yield, really great results. So that's what I try and do. And I try to be a decent person, and help them out. So that's my goal.
That's awesome, John. Again, it's very, very admirable and noble. So that's great work that you're doing. Again, I just want to take a second. Thank you for being on Time We Discuss, and we got to talk about your business and what it's like to be working in PR.
Thank you so much, Dan. We'll talk soon.